This project, supported by the Tasmanian Climate Change Office, facilitated by Aged and Community Services Tasmania, and we're Sustainable Living Tasmania. So today we're going to go, it's broken into two key sessions. So first of all, we're going to go through an overview discussion of thermal issues with the building fabric and energy billing. We'll have a discussion and a break, and then go through energy using plant and equipment, solar PV, which some people have been interested, and different financing options. And we'll have some lunch at the end of all of that. As I discussed, we'll probably be having some people coming in during the course of the morning. So we did 9 energy audits in facilities around the state, and it's an energy audit according to an Australian standard, 3598, and it's a level 2 energy audit. So there's 3 levels of audit, from pretty much a quick overview. Level 2 is the intermediate level. Level 3, you're getting down to attaching data logging equipment to a lot of your plant to have a really detailed knowledge of what's going on. So an energy audit is great. It's much better if they get implemented. It's much better if they get integrated into your decision making. So we've got a lot of facility managers here today. What we need to do is get a lot of financial officers in the room as well. So having that coordination between what's happening at the maintenance and development end to who's paying the power bills. And once somebody is paying $300,000 for a power bill and you ask for something to reduce that, then it might be a happy marriage. So it's one thing which is, we're just going to touch on it here, and we don't spend a lot of time in the rest of the presentation, but it's to do with developing energy management plans. So the first step is identifying what you want to do as an organisation. So you need to admit that it's or adopt a policy to go, okay, we want to delve into this and really want to address it. Need to appoint somebody who's taking responsibility. So whether it's yourselves or a financial officer or somebody else within the staff. Energy audits, energy monitoring. So working out what the baseline is and seeing what the opportunities are, and then come up with a management plan that gets signed off and a set of priorities to go forward. About half to 2/3 of that has been completed in the energy audits that we've done. After that, it's implementation. It's making sure the rest of your staff are on board, and it's evaluating regularly. So it's making sure that you're achieving your targets, that it actually gets monitored, that there is actually energy savings going on, and importantly, that those energy savings get translated into financial savings. So 3 key benefits of an audit. Financial, there's a lot of money to be saved here. And Paul was telling us about his power bill after doing solar and heat pumps and lighting, and what was the details there? Mm-hmm. Okay, so for Smithton, that's from about $12,000 a month in winter to about $6,000 a month in winter through some energy efficiency work. So that's half the winter energy bill. That's a great example. So it's also, there's some unknown financial elements. For example, LED lights have got a longer service life, so there's less maintenance in replacing those. Newer, more efficient plant and equipment is less likely to break down tomorrow, so you're going to be reducing your maintenance costs ongoing. There's a key environmental benefit, and for us and the Tasmanian Climate Change Office, it's about reducing the carbon footprint, the energy footprint of businesses. And key way for doing that is about energy efficiency. The second part of it is about producing renewable energy on site, which is the solar or wind or what have you comes in. A third key benefit is management, in that this audit process can help you inform an upgrade process. So if you're looking ahead and going, what's going to happen with my hot water system over the next 10 years? It's knowing when piece of equipment fails, okay, I've already thought through what I'm going to be replacing it with, so it can help in identifying that from a management perspective. We make a series of recommendations in the audits. Some are zero to low cost, and we're talking about, that can be behaviour change, it can be making sure a door gets closed that gets propped open by staff all the time, which is just letting out heat. It can be things of that sort of nature. Medium cost recommendations, a lot of those have come down to things like insulation, just making sure it is well installed, well covering all of the spaces. And there's high cost recommendations where you start getting into solar PV, you're starting to getting into looking at your whole HVAC system. And they're big ticket items, but they're the areas that have the largest payback as well. So we worked with 9 facilities around the state, 814 beds. If you're wondering why your facility didn't get audited, it's not my fault. The process was run, the Climate Change Office liaised with Aged and Community Services Tasmania to run an expression of interest process. I wasn't part of that. I got handed 9 facilities to go and call and offer the audit to. So we had facilities size from 55 to 136 beds. So it seems to be a lot of facilities around that 55 bed level, not so many up in the larger size. And there were 3 with pools, and pools are a big anomaly. Anyone here got a pool in their facility? Okay, so we just won't bother talking about that, but they use a lot of energy and all had on-site commercial kitchens and laundries, well, all but one. So when we do an audit, first of all, we talk to whoever's in charge and get hold of all the energy bills. And in particular, it's really important to have at least 12 months worth of data, because you all know winter use is about twice as much as summer use. So you need to see what that is looking at over the year, both gas and electricity, and preferably if you've got an interval data on the electricity as well. We do a site visit where we go, we're trying to build up a model of what's going on in a facility. So the one bit of data we've got at the top level is the energy bills. At the detailed level, we can look at, there's a computer, there's a light, there's a hot water system. And then we try and build up a model of everything that's happening in the building to meet the energy consumption that we know you've been billed for. So we'll be looking at what's the duty cycle of your heating systems, how are they operating? What's the duty cycle of the hot water systems, how much water are they delivering? And trying to actually use there's a whole lot of industry standard figures to go and build up a detailed model of your facility and how it uses its energy. We assess the thermal performance of building structures. And a lot of these, some of it you can deal with at a retrofit level, some of it you really want to get right at the design and build. And there's a lot of ad hoc buildings out there, so I'm sure you've all encountered. Identify where good behaviour is happening already and make recommendations. So just identifying all this without giving you a pathway forward is pretty useless. We put all of that in a written report. And there's a summary report on your desk here, which is about 15 pages, and it goes, that's an overview of the recommendations and the findings. There's also this report and a bunch of other resources are put up on our website. So after this is if you go to www.slt.org.au/aged-care, there's links to energy efficiency work that's been conducted interstate. There's a lot of fact sheets, guides, toolkits. There's this brief as well, and there's also the link to this presentation if you want to look back and see one of the slides. So we've also managed to benchmark 9 facilities. So Tasmania's got different conditions to the mainland, and we're talking about down the Huon or up in New Norfolk, the cold air drainage that's really creates a difficulty of heating in winter. So we've got a hard climate. We've also got interstate, there's a lot more use of gas in facilities than there is here. It's probably looking that the rollout of the gas network's probably not going to continue much further, as that's our assessment of the situation. And it's also gas prices are probably going to increase in the future. like what power has done over the last 10 years, they're predicting gas is going to be doing that because it's now being sold on the international market. So our power went up when we joined the national market. Now gas will go up because we're joining the international market. So that's progress. We've also got some unique tariff structures. So aged care facilities, a lot of them are running on a legacy tariff, which is going to be changing through time. So here's this graph here has got, we plotted on the vertical axis is the amount of energy used in a facility. The bottom axis is about the number of beds. It all ends up being a bit of a linear function, and it's basically saying the more beds you have, the more energy you use. But it's not one extra. Doubling the beds doesn't double the amount of energy you use. There's a kind of a baseline energy use. Interestingly, that line from New South Wales studies has come up as the best single indicator of being able to predict energy use in a facility. Now, one thing you can look at this line is if you're above the line, you should be trying to get below it. If you're below the line or on the line, this is facilities who might not have even implemented any energy efficiency works. There's a big opportunity to drop down from there. So I consider that a baseline, and we can see the facilities moving from there. And I'm sure you all know the special considerations that you need to take care of is keeping people comfortable. And that comfort is much higher than the general population's comfort levels. High lighting needs from macular degeneration and so forth. A lot of energy intensive services. So you're running 100 houses under one roof pretty much, all the laundry, all the cooking. Ad hoc complex buildings. Has anyone got one facility built at the one point in time that's built to a good energy standard? So we're all battling against history of the buildings. You're all operating around the clock, and that actually has some benefits as well. And there's a whole bunch of compliance issues which we're just starting to rub up against at the moment. Yesterday we were looking at thermostat control systems, and then informed that every room needs to be individually controllable by the occupant. It's like, oh, okay, didn't know that. So there's that, fire doors, access ways, a whole bunch of things which you need to adopt your energy efficiency to match the requirements of these buildings. So we're going to touch on the thermal comfort area first up. Now, this graph here shows Energy Star ratings of buildings. So it's a 10-star rating system, starting at 0, which is effectively you're living in a tent, to 10, where you don't actually need to heat and cool your house, because it is so well designed with solar gain, thermal mass, and insulation that it will pick up enough heat on that one sunshiny day a week in winter and actually stay warm through the course of it. You can go and buy houses off the plan at 9 stars nowadays. There's people who have got designs worked out to that level for this climate. Now, I'm going to try and find a pointer because I'm realizing it's a really crucial laser pointer. Here we go. Okay, hello, I'm back. So this is the current mandatory standards 6-star. If you're built in the pre-1980s, you're probably looking at around here. Now, this is energy on the vertical column. It could also be dollars. Like energy is money. So the better you build your building in the first place, the more you're saving money. The worse you're building here, you're fighting this in the first place. So you're going to be looking for, what can I do that's going to be bringing from 2 stars down down to 4. That's achievable as well. This is a graph from Hobart in 1984. It was a good year for Hobart. These temperature, and these are the months of the year from summer to summer with winter in the centre. Upper thermal comfort band is identified by the general population. This was a general population survey. Lower comfort zone. Now, for your aged care facilities, you're probably somewhere between 21 and 25, somewhere in that band. This is the mean minimum temperature, mean average temperature. So what we've got is a situation where this green line is what a poorly performing building's doing. It's in summer, it's actually picking up too much heat. In winter time, it's dropping down to a really cold climate. What you need to do is you need to make up that difference in energy through fans or aircon. You need to make up this amount here in heating. And you compare to a more efficiently operating building, and you're just having to pump a much less energy into it to keep it within that thermal comfort zone. So I won't belabor this. We lose more heat through the roof than we do through the floor. We also lose a lot of heat through walls, windows, and leakage, so drafts. So we're going to cover each one of these through the course. And you've got two key elements into the building design, and one is the structure of your building, so choice of materials, how it's sealed, the building fabric, how much insulation you're putting into your walls, how you're detailing it, how many windows you're putting into it, what type of windows you're putting into it. The other side of the coin is the orientation. So really about, can you suck that free energy from the sun into your building? And there's a bunch of issues to do with poor orientation of buildings that really work against their efficiency. Anyone here doing a renovation at the moment? Yep. And what point in the process are you at? Okay, so we've got somebody midway through a renovation, and did you any considerations for energy efficiency through it? 6-star rating? Excellent, excellent. So did you get that modelled by an energy rating, or was it as deemed to comply? There's two ways. Okay, so for people doing developments, there's two ways of achieving a star rating. One which is deemed to comply, which says I need X amount of insulation, I need X amount of double glazing, I need so-and-so hot water system. There's a few different things that go into it which say, okay, that becomes a 6-star building. The other approach to it is actually getting someone to actually computer model the thermal performance of your building and optimize it. And that is probably a much better way to go in terms of that particular placement of a window, moving it up or down, or increasing its size by 6 inches, or decreasing it to make a really big difference to a building. So if people, next chance you get, and it seems like there's lots of buildings being constructed in the aged care sector, is if possible, try and model the energy performance. So here we've got an example of a facility, beautiful north-facing single glazed windows. There's also this western-facing window. I think it picks up a view of the mountain. However, this western-facing window, here they put in some shading because it gets too hot in here in the afternoon. Sun shining through the window there, and they have to run the aircon to keep this room cool. Whereas not actually having put this window in the first place would have actually probably got it to a point where it didn't actually need an aircon to run. So this positioning of glazing is crucial. Insulation is fundamentally important. Most facilities we found had insulation of about this 140 mil, maybe even less, maybe none at all. This is the current BCA standard, is R4, but you can keep on going. It's diminishing returns, admittedly, but at construction phase, The cost isn't in the installation, it's about having someone in your roof putting it in there. So if you can go thicker at that point, it's really worthwhile. However, having someone in your roof with the installation is only as good as the installation. Here we've got thermal imaging, and you can see these pits which are orange. That's a warm, which is showing it's well insulated. Here is a misplaced bat in the roof, and you can see energy leaking through this area, over here as well. Down here, there's a light fixture. A light fixture, the penetration through the roof is it's a hole. They're not sealed for drafts. The insulation is pulled away from the light fixture so that it's not going to catch on fire. It's a little bit of a disaster zone for the thermal performance. And there's lighting solutions now for replacing downlights where you can actually insulate over the top of them. So it's a LED light, which is an upgrade, and insulating over the top of it. So you win on the energy from your lighting and you win on your thermal performance. Okay, might get Beck up here to talk us through some of these pictures. You've got to stand here and talk this way.
Okay. So we just included some photos from facilities around the place. Included this one because we actually had the building plans and we actually had the designer escorting us around the facility. And the plans clearly specified that there were some insulation throughout the ceiling cavity, and since the building's been built, nobody who knows has looked up there to find that there's insulation over the resident rooms, but over all the hallways, which are all heated, there's no insulation. It just wasn't put in. How that happens, I don't know. I think just builders not appreciating how important it is, or cost savings. Oh, okay. This is another thing that we see a lot of. This is an area that had been recently renovated. I think some skylights had been put in and the roof had been replaced. The roof line had been replaced to lift the living area. And I think at the time of insulation, the bats were probably installed well, but subsequent tradies had been up there, and there's a bat up there, I don't know. But yeah, completely compromised the insulation in that area. So it almost needs to be a requirement of any tradie to get assurance that they reinstate any insulation that they move. Now, this is an old building with new buildings on either side, and you can see this is the insulation. It's old cellulose blow-in stuff. It's good that it was there, really good for the time of the age of the building. It was put in, but it's less than 50 mils. You'd have an R value of 1 or less. Not sure what these are doing here, but they certainly weren't over the whole roof space. Just needs to be improved. Underneath this was floor heating, so there's this constant loss of heat up through the ceiling. Oops, sorry. This is a whole wing with absolutely no insulation. This wing was built in a long line, and there are wings on either side, built at the same time. Wings on either side had been insulated, but this whole large area had just been missed. Very hard to imagine how. And for all this time, the staff have been complaining about this wing being really cold compared to other wings. Another thing with insulation that we encountered was light wells and skylights. This hallway overheats in summer. Upgrade had lifted the ceiling up to the roof line and put in these roof windows. Made a lovely light open feeling in the hallway, but it gets really hot. And they put tinting on the windows, which have been picked up by birds. But this is what it looked like in the ceiling cavity. The whole internal wall in the cavity and the whole length of the corridor was uninsulated. So that this side is north facing, pops a lot of heat. I don't know what temperature it would get up into the ceiling cavity, but probably well over 30, 40 degrees. Just passes through into the hallway. And there's a heat pump there, and I think there's another heat pump at this end used to keep temperature down. And this is just we saw this a lot too, just pretty well every no light well that we could see had any insulation on the shaft wall. Mostly they don't have diffusers either, and so the heat's going up and just being lost into the ceiling cavity, let alone out of often the single glazing at the top. But it wasn't all bad. There's certainly lots of areas that were well insulated. This is what we like to see. Not entirely sure what's going on. I suspect these are extra bats overlaid, but on the whole, that was a good example.
Thanks. Thank you, Beck. So, you're all facility managers. Who goes into their roof? Really? Who looks into the roof? Do you have somebody who you can trust who can go into your roof? Yeah, so it's actually having an inspection or an audit, or getting somebody else in to do it, to see the status, engaging reputable installers to check it out, making sure it's actually done to a standard, and key areas is to do with complete coverage. So if you're leaving areas uninsulated, it's really compromising the whole lot. It needs to have a complete coverage. And it's also having a follow-up on your tradies and their work. So instructing them to replace the bats, informing them that you're going to actually pay them for the time they're up there replacing the bats. If you're a plumber, you don't want to do anything that's not plumbing, but you're going to get paid a lot more as a plumber replacing bats than you are as a plumber, as an insulation installer. So ask them to do it. Yep. Here's an example which is from a situation where we needed to increase the insulation over a section of a building, and we also needed to insulate the light well shafts. And they had a $50,000 heating bill in this area of the building. We were going to reduce that by about 20% with the insulation upgrade, and there was tricky suspended ceilings. So we've gone to a very conservative $10,000 upgrade, giving a payback of 1 year on improving your insulation in this section. Low-hanging fruit, and the beauty of insulation is it works no matter how hard people try against it. Like, people can turn their heater on at 30 degrees, the insulation still works. People can leave the door open, the insulation's still working. It's kind of an independent passive element, which we really like. So we touched on this before. It's like there's a lot of skylights and light wells. There seemed to be that often they're poorly designed and installed and creating a convection current. So this is a cool, often single glazed surface. So your hot air is rising, going to hit this cool surface and drop down again. And you're going to create a cooling chimney from these. So ideally, you're looking at how lower down you can actually have a diffuser or a secondary glazing at ceiling level. Still can let the light through, but it's actually going to stop that thermal current. Often we run into this sort of issue here, where we've got a firefighting equipment, smoke detectors put high right up in these light wells. And here, this is a really tricky situation where you need to make sure that your fire safety issues are compliant, but it's whether you can arrange for these to be moved down to your actual ceiling level rather than right up at this high point, because this is continually churning your hot air out of your building. We did see some examples of plastic films installed over the glazing at this point, and some variable success on that. One facility had a whole bunch of cockatoos had torn off the film off their roof, which is something you wouldn't have anticipated, but can happen. Another option is installing secondary glazing at that high level, so turning it into a double glazed piece of glass there. So here's another example of improving around light wells, and we're looking at about a 4-year payback for bats and on the insulation area, and also I'm pretty sure that was also fitting a diffuser screen. So I'm just going to touch on windows and window coverings. So a lot of this is built in at the building point. The size of your windows, that gets determined when you build. The orientation gets determined when you build. The type of glazing, whether you choose double or single glazing or triple glazing if you're feeling really keen, the frame and the frames. And they all can impact on your heat loss, your heat gain, and overheating in winter in particular, all in different areas. This is the area where you've got some flexibility with your facility once it's built. So if you're overheating in summer, it's increasing your shading on those windows. And it's either internal blinds or external shade shutters or sails, and window coverings for preventing heat loss in winter. So this is another graph here, and at the bottom here we've got the U value, which is basically the bigger the number, the more heat you are losing from that part of your building element. A number 0 means that your building element is infinitely insulated. It's never going to lose any heat through it at all. Single glazed aluminium frame is right here at the end of the chart. So it's losing 6 watts every metre squared, every degree difference. Now, often you'll have a 20-degree difference between the inside of your building and the outside of your building, particularly in winter. Like if it's 0 degrees outside and you're trying to be at 20 degrees, so every metre squares, that's losing 120 watts in an hour. Times 24 by 120 watts. I'm not good at maths on my feet, but it's a lot of energy losing through one bit of single piece of glazing. So you improve it. You do double glazing. You've got down to about half the energy loss. You've got double glazing with a film attached to it and argon in the centre, which is less conductive than air. That's the Rolls-Royce of double glazing. Here, and you're at about 2, U value of about 2. We run that down to seeing this. This is an uninsulated brick veneer wall, which is around 2. Your best double glazing is about as good as an uninsulated wall. It's a hell of a lot better than a single glazed aluminium frame, but it's still a really weak part of the building construction. So it's about making sure that glazing is really working for you. It's in the right place. So making sure it's in a place which can pull in heat gain at the right point in time and not be south-facing windows, unless they've got a spectacular view, are really, really quite difficult. And it's quite tricky when this one doesn't move forward, isn't it? So what we found, a lot of single glazing, which is fair enough, especially given the age of the buildings. It's really expensive to retrofit single glazing to double glazing. It's possible, it's a very expensive part. A lot of really good window coverings in residence rooms. I'm really impressed at how they're performing in residential wings. Communal areas, often larger windows, use no coverings, often overheating as well as overcooling. A lot of window films and blinds were necessary at times as well. What was really, really good for us was just seeing how good quality a lot of the seals were around windows because preventing drafts. G'day, how's it going? Hi, Steve. So just an example of a window that's working against a facility. This is 3 stories of double glazed windows facing south. And it's got an okay view over the facility, but it's quite possible that they could have put in half as much glazing in this area, maintained a view and light, and be losing a lot less heat out of this corridor. So that design phase is getting your glazing right. Residential rooms with really good fitting windows. Here, pelmets, no pelmets. Does anyone know what's the point of putting these on top of a window?
It up in around the window because the window draws air or air through and back around.
Excellent. Okay, thank you, Steve. Come in with a bullet. So, yeah, that's exactly right. For the people in Smithton who are webcast, I'll just repeat the answer. Is the glass is generally cool. You'll get hot air rise to the ceiling, come on, hit the cool air of the window and drop down behind the curtain. And that process is creating a circuit, a cooling circuit on the window. The pelmet just locks across the top of it and stops that hot air from your roof touching the cold air of the window, and that's how it operates. Really simple part of a building fabric. If you don't have them, is try and work out how they can be installed. There's some really, look at this one over here. Hot pink, it's beautiful, beautiful. It's also at the design phase, you can actually set your curtains in behind something that looks like of your plaster and so on. So there are solutions there. Okay, westerly facing windows. Here's some pretty nice shades, metal roller shades, which were, I think they were operated by a motor was winding them up and down. And here's another good option in some locations, which is honeycomb blinds. Really, really neat and not, you can make those fit exactly snugly into the window and avoid that having to have an ugly pelmet because it's actually set into the window. And on the far side of this building, some honeycomb blinds, so you can check out how they fit and really help. Okay, it's a good arrow, isn't it? So we're looking at zoning in buildings, and we've got some really large, complex, strange-shaped buildings. But as a general principle, being able to isolate sections of your building so that they don't get drafts through them, that they can be heated independently at a level appropriate for them is a good approach. Often running into issues to do a few facilities, long sloping corridors, joining two wings. And the air pressure differentials actually sucking a lot of air up that corridor, really drafty, and with a lot of single glazing on a long corridor, it's creating a really good air conditioning system for a building, which is trying to be kept warm. So in that situation, it's ensuring that there were open doors at either end, but electric sliding doors. So staff with a trolley could still come through and get into the building, but that would be cutting down a lot of heating loss through there. Bit of issues to do with fire doors, to do with basically residents wandering. So incorporating that into your management is kind of a trick that really would have to happen in discussion with yourselves. So Beck, what's happening here?
So this is a wing, the wing. It's an internal, or out of the lovely light window in the roof. And it's just an example of how, I guess they've gone to an expert, they've isolated the whole wing with a glass window so that in this wing the doors are open, but in other wings the doors are actually closed. So it's a nice example of how they have the capacity to zone off each wing. But as Anton said, like even in this with a glass door, we appreciate that the amenity of or the function of the wing changes as soon as you shut those doors, and that's probably an issue that's hard to work around. How much traffic flow you want or you don't want. But it's a nice example of how they've actually designed in zoning into each wing. Especially with that light bulb, if those windows are open, if it's an open, you get heat just channeling up into the ceiling.
Okay, thanks Beck. The draft's just going to touch on these. Old buildings leak, and they leak in strange places which you haven't thought of. Skirting boards, around window frame elements and walls, light fixtures, exhaust fans, chimneys, penetration. Anywhere you've got a penetration through your building is probably going to be leaking, and a lot of them are hidden behind a bit of board, But if a heat pump gets installed and there's the pipes through the wall, it's actually making sure that they get detailed to avoid leaks. You actually get two issues going. One is it wants to move from hot to cold. The other one is actually where on a windy day there's a vacuum gets created inside the building, which is actually trying to suck your air out of your building as well. And reducing the amount of points where there's these holes is crucial. I'm not going to cover on that, but just looking simply under doors, quite a number of large air gaps, quite common. Here's something to go and have a look around your facilities. This is a bathroom window. Bathroom has a electric exhaust fan attached to the light switch. It also has this vent up here above, permanently venting outside the building. Now, if anywhere else in your building you've had a hole in your wall that size, you'd be trying to patch it up straight away. But it seems to be like it's okay to have this giant hole permanently put in your building. You multiply that through a whole wing, it's going to be having a door open all the time to the outside. So I'm going to be passing on this next section to Rebecca, who's going to be talking about your components of your energy bills and how to optimize those.
Okay, thank you. So total energy is, in Tassie's conditions, is pretty, we're focusing on electricity and gas. What we're paying for energy is obviously a combination of how much we actually use. So we're going to just to run over what facilities are using and what the unit price for that energy is. And that's, we'll go into that as well. Electricity is measured in kilowatts, the gas is measured in megajoules. Most of the energy is used as electricity, so just for ease of comparison, we've converted gas usage into kilowatt hours using the conversion, and then we can add them together. So we know that aged care facilities use a lot of power. This top graph is showing annual use of energy for all the 9 facilities that we looked at. This is the absolute amount of energy. So blue is electricity, red's gas. And what that translates to is our biggest facility is using over $300,000. Their power bill is $300,000, which is a lot of money. The average is just under $2,000. Now, the easiest way to, as we've mentioned, shown with the benchmark, the easiest way to standardise things is just actually on the number of beds. So if we look at the graph where the energy use is standardised per bed, there's a bit more of a consistent level of usage there with a couple of concerning facilities there. So on average, it's about just over $2,000 a year per bed in these facilities. So again, if we have a look at our benchmark graph, idea is to these facilities in particular want to be looking at how they can get lower. With time, it would be nice to increase the number of facilities in this, and with time, it would also be nice to see the progression as more and more facilities take up energy efficiency upgrades, but this line would actually move down. Would be a gratifying thing to see. So electricity is used in all energy sort of sectors in the building. Gas, as you all know, used in hot water, mostly in laundries and kitchen. Appliances in the kitchen and laundry, and we had one of the facilities had a gas boiler on the heat the water in the pool. So if we just go on and look just at electricity costs, we'll come back to the gas component in a bit. The cost of just electricity is just under $2,000 per bed. And the largest electricity bill was just under $300,000. So they're big amounts of money, plenty of scope for reducing, hopefully, the quantity used. Now, we found it quite interesting, the variation that we found in what people were paying for their electricity. This facility is on a completely different tariff to any other that we saw, and is it's actually a peak demand tariff, but the facility is responsible for, they own and they manage and maintenance of the high voltage equipment, so the switching gear and the transformers. So there's a cost in there added onto that that's not actually easy to quantify, but actually boosts the value of that up. So, but for the purposes, we'll just not go there any further.
Talking to some folks that it seems adopting that strategy would only make sense. You're building a new facility where Tas Networks were making you install new transformer for your facility. In that case, they make you pay for it, and then you give it to them. So you're better off keeping it and getting charged less for your power. It's only in that situation be worthwhile pursuing.
But if we come back to the other facilities, there's still a range in the average cost of electricity. So what we've done is just got the total annual bill and divided by the number of kilowatt hours. So it's not taking into account the fluctuations of different tariffs. So we got some about 16 cents up to 19 cents per kilowatt hour. Now, if I was running a facility, I would be much keener to have the lower, be paying 16 cents a kilowatt hour. So just look into a bit where that difference is coming from. So just, what does a cent make? What does 1 cent difference in your energy, your payment, your unit price actually mean? For a large account using 1.5 million kilowatt hours, just getting that 1 cent reduction is going to save you $15,000. Even on a small account, still $6,000. So we're just going to look at a bit of what the bill's comprised of. Everybody's familiar with the front piece. Oh, is everybody with? Do people know? I know there's one ERM account here. Does everybody? Aurora. Everybody? Aurora. Oh, you're with ARM. Okay. Yeah. Okay. We only had one ERM on the facilities that we audited. The same fee structure goes into ERM as Aurora. Same components are there on the bill, but we'll just look at the Aurora bill. This just tells you how much you owe and when it's due. So the first bit is contract charges. We're all familiar with the contract that you negotiate with Aurora or ERM every year or 3 years, depending. And that just stipulates how much you're going to pay. It's a time of use tariff. The contract charges are a time of use, so you sign up for a year's worth of unit price for the peak, which is 7 o'clock in the morning to 10 o'clock at night during weekdays, and then the rest of the time is about a cent cheaper. And that's the most readily, everybody knows that that's negotiable. And that's the first sort of entry onto the details of the Aurora bill. Gets multiplied to every unit of power that goes through the meter. So this is just showing the variation in what people are paying for their contract component of the power bill. For the peak period, which is the higher bit, the lowest we found was 5.6 cents, the highest was 7.4. So that's 1.5 cents difference in the range of what people are paying. This, and the same with the off-peak, a bit over 3 cents to 5 cents, so almost 2 cents difference. Not really sure what's going in. I mean, it depends on the time that contracts negotiated, but this is an area where there's definitely scope for negotiating and negotiating hard. I suspect a lot of people just sign off on it. But it is, if you don't, at very least, you should play off Aurora and ERM to get the best. Because pretty well all the other fees are more or less standard depending on what tariff you choose. But this is probably where you get the biggest option for negotiating. Yes?
So what if you were to negotiate right at the moment, Rebecca? What do you
right at the moment it's probably not great. What do you think? You are locked into your contract time, so the only time to negotiate is when the contract comes to an end, which is maybe as much as 3 years ago. You were making a comment about the contract. What,
I missed the question.
if you negotiate now with the cost of producing power, it's going to reflect badly in the contract rates.
It appears to me that negotiating now might be a difficult undertaking, and I've also heard that Aurora is actually cheaper than ERM just at the moment. That came out of yesterday's workshop, and it'll be interesting to see, because the diesel generators and the gas generation on the moment would be makes the wholesale price of electricity jumping. So if you do have to negotiate now, it might be worthwhile just trying to do a 1 year contract instead of a 3 year contract.
Yes, and I guess the other thing, if we break down how much power you use between contract and the peak and off peak, the peak is about 45% of the time, off peak's at about 55% of the time. Right, so I'm just sort of thinking on my feet. And they actually equate to about the same proportion of power. I was actually thinking maybe it's better to be focusing on getting a lower price here. But in actual fact, it's the proportional power that you use in each section is about the same. Yeah, so I guess the point is very small reductions in that contract charge are worth chasing. The next part of the bill are basically pass-through charges that the retailer doesn't have a lot of say over. They just collect them and pass them on. They're the environmental levy fees, the renewable programs, and administration charges to the Australian energy market, and metering charges. They are also, all those fees are applied to every unit of energy used, except for the metering charge, which is covered up there. That's just a daily fee. So we still looked at those pass-through charges, and again, there's these environmental levies and energy market fees. There's still a significant range in what people are paying, from less than a cent to 1.5 cents per kilowatt hour. Still worth chasing. Those fees are contestable. It's probably trickier to do, and you're probably needing, I don't know how you do it, but energy brokers will negotiate on those, and they'll do it annually, trying to get the best deal. Probably worth chasing.
Was that a difference from site to site, or was it over time?
These are all for the same time period. This is all comparing what each of our facility was using over the same time period for the 2015 year. Metering charges aren't worth bothering about too much. There's a big difference, but they're only multiplied out by 365 days, and they actually count for less than 0.05 of the power used, so it's not worth getting hung up on. So the final group of charges are the network charges, and this is what's getting interesting. They're charged based on your selection of tariff, and there's a number of tariffs that we encountered, but again, they're just the tariffs are listed, and whatever the pricing out mechanism is detailed there. So these are the tariffs that we found, except for TAS 22, but I've included that for a very special reason. This TAS 34 is was set up as a discounted tariff for aged care sometime in the past. 5 of our facilities used it, so I suspect it's probably being used somebody out here. It's obsolete, And if you are using tariff 34, you need to start thinking about where you're going to go over the next year or two, because you're going to be penalised for using it. But basically, it's essentially a fixed rate tariff. There's a slight step in it, but the step is so small that it doesn't, the first 2,000 kilowatt hours of the year are more expensive, and then it comes down to a heavily discounted tariff rate. All your electricity is comes through this fixed rate, as does TAS 22. Next. Okay, we'll come back and show you the difference in prices of the tariffs in a later slide. Then there are the specialty tariffs, TAS 41 and TAS 61, which can be used in conjunction with tariffs like 34, or this time of use tariff. And they're heavily discounted for those energy intense services of hot water heating and heating. TAS 61, I think we'll know, is off-peak with afternoon boost. And again, is a very cheap energy tariff. TAS 94 is we had 2 facilities and 3 accounts using TAS 94. It's time of use, so any power that you use overnight is absolutely dirt cheap, but as soon as you get to 7 o'clock in the morning to 10 o'clock at night, it goes up. It might be an option, but once you leave the tariff 34 behind, you're starting to get to need energy management, and I guess that's where the providers are trying to push people to start managing their energy to get the benefit of whatever tariff they're in. So with TAS 94, if you can manage your energy to maybe push some energy intensive activities into the off-peak time, then it's going to be to your advantage. Same with the peak demand. The next 2 tariffs are both peak demand. So for this graph, it's showing you the profile of use of a facility throughout the 24 hours. And depending winter versus summer, they're all going to look different. But a peak demand tariff has a very small component of the cost is from multiplying out every unit of power by a small unit price. But then they have another factor in them where whatever this value is then multiplied by a unit cost, either on a daily basis or what the highest point is during the month. And if you can manage that and bring it down to the lowest level, then peak demand tariffs are a very good option, and they are probably the way of the future. So anybody on tariff 34 needs to start thinking about where they're going to go. And often it's just shifting startup schedules, making sure the heaters don't all start at once, making sure not every appliance in the kitchen gets turned on at once, just so this peak might be avoided, and you're multiplying 70 rather than 80 by the demand factor.
Probably an approach there would be that you need to start looking at energy monitoring, trying to work out exactly where those peaks are, and potentially some smart switching gear to shift off loads that are non-crucial. And for example, one thing could be is making sure your hot water systems are never cycling on, having them on timer so they're not cycling on between 7 a.m. and 9 a.m. whenever that peak period is. Just make sure that heavy load is not going to hit at that time. So a lot of approaches can go there.
So this graph is just basically showing we've lost something. Oh no, this is TAS 22. So TAS 22 is the general business tariff, and that's where TAS 34 is heading. Every year it's increasing by 6% plus CPI, and that 6% is going to escalate until that line correlates to TAS 22, and nobody wants to be paying that. And that's why even so between this year and next year, this is going to increase by 6%. So this line is going up and up and up, and it's just already in the next year or two, it's not going to be competitive compared to other options. Black is the contract charges, so paying 5 and 7 cents during the peak. Green is TAS 41, that's the hot water. You can see that's reasonably competitive. Off peak though is much lower, it's less than a cent per kilowatt hour. The interesting one is the time of use tariff 94, where you come along nicely until 7 o'clock, paying very small amounts. 7 o'clock when you're turning everything on, you're going up to this 16 cents just during weekdays. The demand tariffs has SDM as a very low background per unit price, and that's reflecting that you're having to pay for the infrastructure. Anyway, so they're worth going into, thinking about in the next little while. This graph's just showing what percentage of each bill each bit contributes. So the blue along the bottom are the contract charges, about a third, roughly about a third of the bill. Tariff charges are a bit more variable. And then pass-through charges are about 10%. And the demand charges for those demand tariffs sort of make up the difference. The other thing to just point out, which I'm sure everybody's aware, the difference in seasonal fluctuations. Summer usage without heating is much lower than the winter heat, about half. So the conclusions are that don't just sit on the laurels with your electricity bills. They need to be managed and negotiated. Tariffs need to be chosen carefully, and that might need monitoring. You might need somebody monitoring the actual interval metering, or at least analysing your interval metering. And they should be negotiated hard, maybe at a sector level, if the sectors could work together and negotiate as a whole. That's where the most power is going to be gained. Plus, those pass-through charges are going to be easier to negotiate, and that's getting pretty, starting to need expert negotiating power for that. So, and quickly, gas. Most facilities use gas. Only 3 had access to mains gas. The rest were using LPG. Not a lot. There's no correlation between the price that people are paying for their gas is just very variable. Oh, actually, sorry, this one's how much they used. How much they used just depending on what appliances they had. But what they paid, there was quite a range in that as well. So the minimum somebody was paying was 10 cents, the maximum was 17 cents. And once again, I know what I'd want to be paying. Mains gas was no cheaper than LPG, which was surprising. They fluctuated across, the range of them fluctuated across. It just seems to be, depending on what the price is on the day that you take out an account. I think a lot of facilities don't ever renegotiate their gas price, but clearly there's a lot of room. You just start paying the bills and they just keep getting paid without anybody stopping and saying, hey, these people are doing very well though.
These all correlate with Tasmania, or?
These are just out of our 9 facilities that this is just the findings. Yes, yeah, so they're across the state. 9 facilities are selected by the Tasmanian Climate Change Office. They ranged in size from 55 beds to 150 or so, 136, all across the state. So, yeah. So the big picture with gas is that in the future, gas will become a thing of the past. It's still an attractive, attractive option now, but with gas pricing going up. At the moment, gas is being priced out at, on average, 13 cents a kilowatt hour compared to electricity at 17 cents a kilowatt hour. By the time you factor in the inefficiency of a lot of the gas appliances, that difference is going to be less. So it may be that with time, there are certainly a lot more appliances, electricity appliances that are starting to really improve their efficiency. Gas dryers, instead of next time you need to buy a gas dryer, there should be large capacity heat pump dryers for laundry. Yeah, it's probably, with pricing, it's probably going to become less popular into the future, less of that one. Right, okay, there's another factor. Is high or high? Okay, so another factor to put into. Okay. And, you know, if you're really looking for zero net emissions from a purely environmental point of view, that renewable energy sourced electricity is definitely worth maximum environmental benefit. So in summary, the best outcomes are probably going to be employing an energy broker. You know, it's a specialised area, it's a hard area, and the negotiations are complex, and they need to be done regularly, especially for those pass-through. You know, well, all those negotiable things can be done annually, as well as gas. Not forget the gas. And we like to think that with saving the price, what you're paying on power, saving you money, but not having an environmental outcome, but maybe that savings can be used to reinvest into energy efficiency outcomes. This is just an example of one facility just recalculating their hot water that was being priced at, I think it was on TAS 34, putting it onto TAS 41. The hot water tariff would have saved them $6,000 a year. So this is an example of what an energy broker might do. So, you know, the energy broker, they take a commission, so you're going to save and they're going to gain. Okay, so that looks like break time or discussion. Discussion first.
Comments from folks or questions that we're going through? Some silence.
Well, there's a lot of heat in your ceiling space. So there's a lot of pipes over now that drag that down.
Yep.
That
Or getting kicked up is the best that I stand there for sure. Yeah. So the question was to do with recovering heat from the ceiling space, and there is a lot of free heat available in a ceiling space. You've got, across the course of the year, they're going to be doing a good job for you in spring and autumn. In winter time, there's less available heat, and you'll probably be drawing down cold air. So it needs a good control system. It also needs a HEPA filter of some kind, so you're actually putting clean air down, because you don't want to be sucking down whatever's in your roof into your building structure. But there's a lot of free heat to be gained there, and you would probably be looking at some pretty beefy systems in your sort of facilities and rather than at domestic level. So do you have anything to add to that, Todd?
I think the first step is to try and keep the heat down in the building to begin with, and not let it into the ceiling through insulation and draft proofing. And then after that, look at bringing that any lost heat back down. But yeah.
So you can also circulate the heat from the ceilings through down by installing fans, bringing in the summer and winter modes to disperse that and circulate that air, so it's not sitting in that blanket zone up above the doorways as well. So then it'll push through the doorways and everything as well. Because otherwise it goes up and sits.
Yeah.
Depending on how you have
that's within, like, at the ceiling level inside the.
you know, you've got 2400.
Yep.
The last 400. The air's coming up in that space.
A lot of a well-designed HVAC system is about making sure that there's a slow mixing of the air streams around the building space. So that
don't have a lot of airflow to achieve it. So it can be a pretty low pound fan.
The other function that the ceiling heat recovery systems have is that they also use more hot weather to cool the inside temperature quickly in some situations that might be useful, as well as, you know, the primary function is to ventilate, use dry air to ventilate.
Other queries, ideas, stuff you're doing at your own facility to share?
Question, the airport chart you had there, you had 3 facilities that were either, I think, the far right hand ones on the line out to the colour, were they all pool ones?
The ones with the pools, sorry, this will take a while to get back to. Here we go. The ones with the pools are shown, the question was, which ones are the pools and how does it work on the correlation? All the ones in red are facilities with pools. So you'll see that one
There is a bit of that. One of the pools, which is the one below the line, we didn't actually have the pool was on a separate bill, I think, and we didn't have the billing data for that one that's on the line. So really, it should be above the line.
And this one, when you're looking at about 10% of a power bill from a pool, so that's probably explaining why that one's up there. This one up here is probably doing pretty well, considering that they have a massive extra load on their bill there. But also saying before, there's a long way to drop buildings down the scale.
So ignoring those, you've got two little clusters there. Ignoring those pools, you've got
This class,
they're very similar to the pool.
yeah, well, they're all of the same size facility. So this is a cluster of 100-bed facilities using all about the same power, and some of the small facilities using about the same power. So
It's not a big number.
yeah.
With time, we can also it's the adding.
That my facility would be spot on that line.
Okay.
But have you looked at any of the aged care funding authority data that does sample facilities across different regions?
So I had looked at the New South Wales data. So there's a bunch of audits have been conducted up there, and they have exactly the same line, exactly the same relationship, except they've got less heating load, so the lines kind of drop down a level for New South Wales conditions. So when Beck came up with that regression on the graph, was very heartening. It seems it's matching.
So depending on regional, you can get separation for regional, because some parts of New South Wales, the winter temperatures are very similar to Tasmania. There's an altitude, like they're above 700 metres.
Yep.
So I guess just give you a slight, maybe a slight.
So is that data that's collected?
Yeah, it's collected. Yeah, it's collected on a periodic basis. It's analysed by Glenn Thornton, Stuart Brown, or some other financial analysts.
Okay.
I just released the most recent report in January.
Might have a chat.
It does track energy costs.
That'd be great to get a reference to that report so that we can increase this set.
That might, I think there's about between 70 and 90 facilities in that segment.
So for the benefit of Julia, that's basically that there's a report out there which shows interstate examples of the correlation between energy and bed size, and hopefully we'll be able to populate this graph with some more examples. Just like to introduce you to this graph, which is showing where all the energy was being used in these 9 facilities that we audited. This pretty much matches every graph you'll see of energy breakdown. It's pretty standard, and if you looked at your own home, it'll be looking something similar to this. Except if you had a pool, it's probably going to be very different. This. Okay, so we've got some slides on the presentation, which I probably won't look at now because he pretty much described everything that's on these slides. So you're all familiar with the kind of suite of heating solutions. We could be seeing a hydronic panel. This is just a small convective panel heater. This is an off-peak storage. Sorry about the photo. Here we've got heat pump systems from larger on-roof and with internal ducting to the single console units. Heat panels, we've got them on our roof just above you, and bathrooms predominantly IXL Tastic, so those sort of heat lamp approaches, but a few with the old bar heaters. What's good about the Tastics is that they're not generally on the lighting circuit, so they won't get less likely to be left on compared to one of the radiant bar heaters. Another panel heater, some underfloor heating, and personalised heating devices in rooms. So give the big picture, and then we'll just go through some of the pros and cons of these various systems. One is this is a rule of thumb, and it changes depending on your circumstances, but it's a pretty good rule of thumb is if you increase your internal temperature by 1 degree by heating, it requires 10% more energy. So the difference between 21 degrees and 22 degrees is 10% on your heating bill. 21 and 23 degrees, it's 20% on your heating bill. Now, you've got some hard bottom limits on how warm a space has got to be. Like you can't go down to 17 degrees and tell people to put on an extra jumper. So that's not an option which you might do, like in a personal home, you might try those sort of approaches. Here you've got a hard bottom limit. It's where you apply, it's making sure that the bottom limit's there and then discretionally allocating extra heat into spaces that require it. And that's one way of managing your heat. That's about having good control on your heating systems. So thermostatic control. And somewhere between 20, 22 degrees, whatever's appropriate to the thermal requirements of the resident. That's the most important thing. Thermostats, you're looking for, thermostats on heaters are pretty much useless because they are in a position next to something that's making a lot of heat and there's a lot of cold air rushing towards it to be heated. So it's either going to be too hot or too cold, but very rarely accurately measuring the temperature in the room. Occasionally they will, but it's best to be placed somewhere where it's on an internal wall with some free airflow around it. Not at floor level, not at ceiling level, but at about shoulder height. Probably somebody else's shoulders, not my shoulders. Now, access of controls. We've been informed that the residential rights are that residents have got to have access to temperature controls in their rooms. Is that correct? People? Yep. Yep. On the hot water system? Yep. So in some systems we've seen in older locations where there's one thermostat for multiple rooms. Also seen locations where there's been overriding thermostats. So there's an individual control in a room. There's actually a master control in the switchboard, which can be set to say, you can't heat the room over 28 degrees or 25 degrees, whatever that setting is. Now, how that fits with the regulations, I'll leave you guys to work that one out, or I can work it out for you if you want, but that's another issue. Just touching on timers be a good way of allocating resources, and especially if you're looking at controlling that peak demand issue. If you're going onto those peak demand tariffs, I was talking about switching on hot water systems and so on. Also, switching on and off heating systems might be a good approach. There's a lot of thermal lag in a building, so it means if you heat it, it will maintain this temperature for, might be half an hour, it might be an hour, it might be 5 hours. depending on your building fabric, but you're hitting into an area where you know is going to be something else is happening and that's where your peak is, switch off your underfloor heating for an hour just to avoid increasing that peak. So timing control is can be a good approach. Digital thermostat on a heat pump system, pretty standard on-wall system. You can also get little enclosures on these to stop people fiddling with them if you want. And here is the DeviReg, which is the inner switchboard, the overriding thermostat, which we saw in locations. These need to be wired from the room to the switchboard. So as a retrofit, potentially costly and may well not be worth it. Now, your heating system, you're locked into what you've got to a certain extent, and key considerations are to do with your building fabric. So I know we've got some recommendations. We like ducting systems and we like hydronic heat pump systems, but can you install them in your situation is an entirely different question. But investing in the best heating options has ongoing savings and ensuring that your insulation's right. The lower cost stuff that you can, and we'll go into this high cost stuff in a bit, but the lower cost stuff is making sure the thermostats are accurate, calibrated, and controllable. Thermostat limiting, that zoning your heating area, so whatever heating you're putting into a space is contained there, and making sure it's not leaking out through drafts. Like insulation, draft proofing, zoning, all these things really help that, what effectiveness you're getting out of your heat. Now I'm going to talk about 3 systems of heat pump systems as the most effective sources of gaining heat in a building. And the reason I'm talking about heat pump systems is they extract more energy from the environment than they use themselves. So if you put 1 kilowatt of energy into a heat pump, you get 3 or 4 kilowatts of heat out of it. It's a magic machine. Like literally, you put a little bit of energy in and you get more out of it. The best you can get with a resistive electric heater is you put 1 kilowatt of electricity in and you get 1 kilowatt of heat out. It's a 1-to-1 relationship. Heat pumps 1-to-4. Gas heating, it's still a 1-to-1 relationship. You put 1 megajoule of gas in and you get 1 megajoule of heat out. Now, the heat pump can do this process of extracting heat from the environment. You can either extract heat from air, it could extract heat from the earth, you can extract heat from water, and then it can put that heat, depending on what sort of heat exchangers you use, either into air or into earth or into water, depending on how you want to deliver it somewhere. So pretty much the most common system you'll see is a split system, like a standard residential heat pump. Pros of that, 1 breaks, your whole building doesn't get shut down or overheat or freeze. So there's a benefit. Less benefit is that sometimes the control systems are a little bit difficult and you've got multiple bits of plant that needs maintenance. So you might have 50 different units that all need to be cycled through instead of a couple. Ducted systems also help residential rooms and communal areas with the one system. You can get good temperature control. You can aircon as well, so you can keep it cool during summer as well, which is with long hot summers like we've had increasingly important. The cons are you might get tempted to just use it as all of your temperature control in your building and forget about things like you could open a window to let some natural ventilation through. Some other things which are a bit manual but very, very cheap ways of maintaining your climate. It's also an expensive bit of kit and you might not be able to fit it into a roof. The ducting system requires either a floor cavity or a roof cavity to guide it through. If you don't have those available, you kind of got to take it off the table.
There's another major drawback to
Yep.
current
Mm.
I hate it. And everywhere we put air conditioners in, heat pumps in, we've always had issues.
Mm. So that's a really, like, the movement of air over the body creates a cooling effect. Probably what's better about a ducted system over a split system is a good aircon mechanic can design the ducting so the air movements is a lot less vigorous. So instead of the kind of the gale blowing off the heat pump, it's a much more subtle movement. But it's a really good point. A ducted system is only heating the air, and it doesn't give you that fire building of the radiant heat, which is where having hydronic panels or hydronic floor heat is good, because it's a way of using water to deliver the radiant heat to yourself. You can heat this water up anyway. You can heat it with gas, and that's being done. But similarly, that plant could be converted over to a heat pump plant to generate, to heat that hot water and circulate it around through the same system. And the advantage of that is you're going to be using about a quarter of the amount of energy to actually keep space warm. So you've kind of got an opportunity at some point when those gas boilers start annoying you too much. It's looking at a big heat pump hot water system for delivering heating.
Got the statistics on percentages between electric hot water heating and heat pump hot water heating?
It's pretty much it's the same relationship. It's about, they've got a coefficient of performance of around 400%. So a quarter of the price to run. Now, what happens with all of these heat pump systems is in cold weather, they have more difficulty extracting the heat from the environment. The approach in that situation is, however, they still always remove heat from the environment. They sometimes run a heater to make sure that they defrost, but instead of going from, I don't know what's going on there. Todd, could you go? Yeah. They make glasses upstairs, so I think I've washed the lenses or something. So I might go down to 1 unit of energy in, 2 units out. So it's still 1 in 4 is wonderful, and then down to about 1 in 2 in the cold weather. Now that's still better than the alternative.
Somewhere out in the sunny northern aspect.
Perfect. So it was about, yeah, it's your external units where they're located is crucial. So if you put it in a cold, frosty pocket of your building, it's going to be trying to extract heat out of cold air, and that's harder than putting it somewhere warm and sunny. So roofs are actually a really good place for those units, because there's cold air drainage. Cold air will drop away from them on a north-facing area where they're going to get sunshine, and not in a hollow. So cold air drains like water, so the lowest point receives the cold air. So if you've got it on a hill or a slope rather than in a hollow for the position of the outside units.
So if you're across the area, I mean, really prone to those all the time in winter, is there a solution for that?
Higher. That's the best. That's the best you're going to do. Yeah.
I did hear that places in Europe and that was really bad to get into the ground.
Which I'm glad you asked about ground source heat pumps. Now we account. So what they're doing, instead of trying to extract the heat from the air, they're trying to extract the heat that's in the earth. And so if you go down about 10 meters, it's a constant about 13 or 14 degrees Celsius. And the earth is really, really big. So there's a lot of heat there available to be pulled into the front end of a heat pump unit. There was one facility that we encountered which was using actually sewage effluent that was running in pipes through the earth. So it ends up at that 14 degrees. It might be a bit warmer because where it came from in the first place. And then they're running it through a heat exchange plates, and then a heat pump unit, and then circulating the heat. Now, on paper, that sounded like a wonderful system. However, they were spending a fortune on running the pumps to move the effluent in that situation. So it didn't actually work out very cost effective. Our recommendations were really to be investigating the pumps and how to optimize whether it can be variable speed, making sure the speed of the pumps is actually matching what's required for the heat extraction. So to be the best situation there. Ground source heat pumps, expensive bit of kit to install. You need to go and dig some decent size. You either need to get a drilling rig, or you need to excavate probably down 5 or 10 meters and backfill a series of pipes.
Is it like a trenching, that's not probes that go straight down?
There's ones which do, like depending on the technology, you can go straight down and back up again, and then you run water through, or through a underground grid or what have you. Yep. And yeah, the deeper you go, the better. Yeah, and still at shallow temperature, like the shallower you get, the more likely it's going to be matching the outdoor air temperature. And if you're in New Norfolk and it's 1 degree outdoors and you've only dug a shallow trench, you're not getting much advantage. So the deeper, the better. And for your type of facilities, it might start it's at the sort of scale where it starts to make sense, those big investments. The other side of the coin is the delivery. So one, that's a way that you've obtained free heat. The next part is how you're going to distribute it, whether it's through air or through water, or a construction through your slab. So they're the three ways that you can deliver heat from those types of systems. Any more questions about this type of approach?
I don't think there's anybody in the state doing geothermal that we're aware of. Is probably the biggest problem for us.
Down Vodafone didn't have the car park.
If there was a company,
Down Kingston.
So the lifespan, sorry, lifespan of these sort of systems, what are you talking, 5, 7, 10 years?
The kit under the ground should be 20 plus. Otherwise, you're in trouble, because you'll be talking about, you might be spending $200,000 on this sort of project. So the kit under the ground, it's got a really long lifetime. The actual heat exchange units on the surface, that's going to be more thinking of what a standard heat pump, like those compressors and so on, it's probably 10 years maybe. You guys would know better than me of how long the service life of those sort of 8-10 years. Yeah, so that's a lot of moving parts, a lot of things spinning around. Yeah. Now, getting a designer and that ongoing maintenance with this type of unit would be the critical part. I'm from the Snowy Mountains in New South Wales originally, and up in Jindabyne where I was from, there was a lot of these units going on big ski lodges, big units there, and similarly cold winters, there it's kind of -10 regularly, and that's where you need a large facility and you need a decent heating load, and you meet those criteria. You also need a bit of a paddock. You need a bit of space to go for ground source heat pumps. So if you're really confined up against your boundaries, it might not work unless maybe you were doing a resealing of a car park or what have you, and then you can take advantage of that. Okay, so hot water systems, talking about 20% of the water use. Variable approaches within facilities. Couple of centralised hot water systems, so using circulating pumps. A lot more with the domestic scale storage systems and in multiple locations. Some commercial heat pumps, so we're talking about a wing of a building being done on a heat pump system. So it's about, I think they're having about 900 litres of storage, that sort of scale. But it also heat pumps down at the domestic 200 or 300 litres storage. A lot of gas used for laundry and kitchen hot water. I think, was it all gas for kitchen and laundry? Pretty close anyway. So, two approaches. Get your hot water from somewhere better, use less of it. So we'll go through some 3 really good ways of using less hot water in your systems. 1, shower heads. Each shower head in your building should be checked, and checked for how much water they're using. So if you change out from a shower head that uses a lot of water to one that uses less, A, you're not paying to heat the difference in that hot water, which can be quite a lot of water saving, and B, you're not paying for the water rates for that water that you're using. So you get a double win. Shower head like this, the replacement unit might be $30, $50 depending on the quality. And we'll probably be recommending replacing the whole unit with a good quality unit rather than using a flow restricting washer. And the reason being is if you've got a high use shower head and you replace it with, put in a flow restrictor, suddenly their existing shower's gone terrible. Oh, there's no water comes out anymore. It might be that the shower head's not designed to deliver, the water hasn't been aerated as it comes out. So it might go to, doesn't give us good spread. Replacing it with a new one is something new and shiny, and you probably wouldn't notice the difference between them anyway, because of the quality of a 9 litre per minute shower head can be really awesome. Easy to do with your own maintenance contractors, and I think we're looking at, depending on the site, probably a 2 to 3 month payback period. It can be a really good saver. Anyone here use ozone disinfection in their laundry? How's that going? Well, 3 out of 5. How's it going?
Yeah, it's hard to quantify, right? It's hard to quantify the difference in savings.
Okay, can you tell us more?
We reduce hot water.
Yep.
Considerably.
Yep. So are you using any hot water in the laundry service now?
Very little.
Yep.
Maybe 1 or 2 cycles of work, that would be it.
Okay, so that's quite a lot of hot water reduction. Any other experiences? Having to change procedures or anything like that in terms of the washing?
No. Reduce chemical consumption.
Yep.
Considerably. Yeah.
Okay, so for the help of other people here, it's a bolt-on unit that gets attached to each washing machine. Costs about $7,000 a unit, I think is the rough price. And depending on how much washing you do through that machine, it's got about a 1.5 year payback period, because you're taking that machine from using a hot water sterilising wash at the end of the cycle to not requiring one of those at all. The ozone does the sterilisation process. In this situation we'd worked out that a laundry was previously using $13,000 worth of gas to heat hot water. And we've pretty much taken it down to 0, or maybe it's down to $500 a year if they do the occasional hot cycle. Now, if you can work out what your laundry is using already, then you can, what was using before, then you'll be able to quantify what the actual savings are from those units. But they seem pretty awesome to us. And there's some brochures from the company that sells them over there as well.
Richardson, the same portion of hot water used by laundry was, I can't remember the exact figure, but it was actually quite high. It was close, between 30, maybe even as high as 50%. Like laundries were big users of hot water, so it's I think if you look back over your houses, you would notice the spot where the ozone.
Yeah, or it might be, are you on gas, you're heating the water by gas there? In the laundry?
No.
No, that's electric. Yep. Yep. Okay. Well, maybe some detective work can find it.
Ones that I put in was at the same time at a possible 50 style.
have to be looking at the kilowatt hours. Yep, but on the numbers, it appears to add up. From the experience, it seems to work in facilities. So clothes come out clean. Good combination. Yep. Excellent. Well, there's less chemicals, less environmental loss, cheaper. That's a win-win-win. Okay. Looking around the location of your hot water systems, we've got some thermal images of each one of these systems. So the tank and the heat registry. Red is where there's a lot of heat that's being wasted from the system. Blue or green's a cool colour. So down the bottom here, which is these set of red lines, that's actually the return line from the circulating system. There's still heat in the system coming back to the hot water tank. Up here, this real hot blip here, that's the pressure relief valve, which you'll often see pipe insulation on pipes, but never around the pressure relief valve. And there's a very simple enclosure you can get for about $10 or $15. The clips around the pressure relief valve can be installed in about a minute and still allows the operation of the valve. And that's stopping a large percentage of the heat loss from the tank actually radiating out through that piece of copper attached to the inside of your tank. Very simple thing. Also checking out your pipe insulation. If you've got a circulating system, you want to make sure that lagging is thick and quality all through the building. Difficult if the building's already built because you're not going to find it behind the wall or wherever it's hidden. If it's a new tank that's been installed and if it's not circulating, the crucial area is about the first metre from the tank, getting the lagging right in that area, because that's where it's conducting down the copper pipes directly from the tank. The further away you get from the tank, the less effective that lagging gets. But at installation, install the lagging as a due course.
It looks like there's nice lagging down in the square at the top there. Yeah, out to your left. Bit of copper.
Yeah, I think that's
it there. So, I mean, again, that's the same thing as for the pressure relief valve there. So, yeah, so, there's a lot of spots. So, I look, that's just one of the something like that, but yeah, it's good sort of reference.
And you could, sorry,
the elbow coming out of the tanks really integrated as well. The insulation goes up to the right angle in the pipe to the fitting.
and it's also, you can do things like, if it's a valve which is a custom size and it still needs to operate, it's still opening up bits of insulation around, and you'll lag 3/4 of it. It's still going to a system. Might not look pretty, but that doesn't look pretty in the first place. So circulation pumps. There's a lot of 70 to 200 watts of energy running one of these pumps for circulating hot water around some wings of facilities. Now, if we're looking at how these can be optimized, one of them might be, is there a variable speed pump that can be put in there? So when you need to deliver large amounts of hot water, that they can, and the rest of the time they reduce down to a kind of a maintenance level of delivery. So looking at if they've just got they might have only 3 settings on some pumps, is can you just knock it down 1 setting and see whether it's still providing ample water? It's actually testing its effectiveness. And even timers, does hot water need to be delivered to this place all the time? Is there a wing which gets operated differently so it doesn't need hot water there? Maybe, maybe not. It comes down to you assessing the situation. So we really like this sort of approach on upgrades, and this is a heat pump hot water system. So very large outside unit here, and that's heating up. This is extracting heat from the air, heating up the air to store in these large storage tanks. really well insulated tanks. They also, you can see there's a bit of shady hollow that it's in as well. They also around the corner ran this through to an electric boost as well. So if they had difficulties with the heat pump unit, they had another fail safe there, so another approach. And you're looking at about 75% savings on running costs, not counting the capital costs from this sort of unit. So this is a step up from your standard kind of domestic size systems. Other things which is really nice about heat pump systems is, depending on how they're configured, is control systems. So what temperature you need to keep the water at different times, you can actually change them. So now I'd have to check the compliance for the aged care sector, but I know in residences, they go and deliver the water at 45 degrees, which is what you actually want in a shower or doing your dishes. And then every day they jack the temperature up to 70 degrees to take care of any Legionella risk. So they've actually cycled it. Instead of trying to keep all the heating hot water there at 60 or 70 degrees all the time, it's like, let's do some smarts to control it. So interesting to see if any of that sort of approaches could be worked in the aged care sector as well. Any questions about hot water systems and so forth?
So that one there, that heat pump system is running what would they be? 300 litre, 400 litre?
Yeah, I think there's 300 or 400 litres, and there's another 300 litres, which is, I think.
No, it's electric though, isn't it?
Yeah, so, but I think it's connected, so it's in series. There's about 900 litres of storage run off that heat pump. Yep. If that's a really, really cold morning.
Yeah. And got any rough idea what a system like that might cost to install?
I don't know. Sorry.
We did one another beach, we've just done one.
Yep.
We had two 315s, which I think they are in the ceiling spaces, which are electric. We took them out, we ran the one hot water heat pump with one 315 litre, which still covers those requirements, but we have the option to add an extra 315, not much cost. They're about 3.5 to install, and I think there's still a rebate of $1,000 that you get, so they're $2.5 grand, and they'll pay for themselves in about 18 months.
So that was Jeff Kent from St Anne's, who's replaced it with a kind of domestic size 315 litre heat pump system, and it's looking at about an 18-month payback for getting that installed at their location. This system, I don't know, it's a bigger bit of kit. It was installed by a company called Degree C, and I'd ask them for a quote. We didn't actually see the price of the install, but it was a pretty neat looking system. So lighting.
There's no point, well, you didn't touch on solar voltaic.
Yeah, we'll talk about PV panels, but I suppose we can talk about solar hot water systems as well. Now, solar hot water systems and heat pump hot water systems both attract renewable energy certificates, so you get about $1,000 rebate off them. A solar hot water system generally comes in, the price tag is quite a lot more than a heat pump hot water system. And effectively, this is still getting free heat from the environment, which is what a solar hot water system's doing. I'm going to pass this one to Todd, actually. He's got a lot of experience in the sector.
The other consideration is the lifespan of solar hot water systems. Most of the components, evacuated tubes will last 20 or more years. It's only the pumps and controllers that have shorter, only got 1 to 3 year warranties. Whereas these things, I guess if you maintain them regularly, they last quite a while, but they might last 8 or 10 years. So yeah, there's kind of swings and roundabouts. The solar hot water costs more upfront, but they last longer.
Sorry to interrupt, but with the ones we installed, we actually got the standard. We were told stick with the standard.
Yeah.
Like, we've
high
got
quality
a 15-year lifespan.
warranty. Or, yeah, great.
So the sand they're a flat.
Yeah, that's the incentive because I went to the executive group and said $1,000 is paying for this.
Yeah.
It's supposed to get for free.
Mm. Yeah.
So we're doing each individual house now on a time frame. Because the savings is great.
Yeah.
With the solar hot water. Yeah. Oh, with the heat pump. Yeah, and the heat pumps come in two varieties. So the flat plate, kind of old style solar heart or so on, and evacuated tubes. So they're the round tubes. And in the cold climate, the evacuated tubes tend to perform better. On a cold day, they'll get water hotter than the flat plates will.
Pitch your roof and everything as well, like the pitch.
Yeah.
You want a really steep pitch to solar hot water compared to PV. Solar PV you want at about 45 degrees, whereas solar hot water you want at about 60 degrees because of the seasonal variations. Now, PV you just want as much as you can get. You averaged over the year, whereas with hot water you can't feed it back into the grid when you're not using it, so you really got to try and match it to your demand.
And is it, because we're in Tasmania, different, burning, say, New South or something like that, where they get a lot more sun, a lot more, what I was told about another environmental thing or winter.
Is in the latitude being
Yeah,
marginally.
Yeah.
So generally, we'll get less energy out of the sun in Tasmania. We need to tilt our panels further towards the north than you would if you were close to the equator. They're the kind of the rules of thumb.
There's good technical brochure on solar hot water as you exit the building here.
There's also
charts and
probably
stuff.
another pro and con for that too, is that I know that they're taking down on any weight distribution on roads and stuff. They could, you know, if you go through an engineer basically now to have it all.
Keep your water on the roof.
There, so, well, when that can go both ways. With heat pumps up on the roofs too. So, but
The other thing that's Steve, if you haven't got anchor points and stuff like that, and stuff, and those things on the.
oh yeah.
You add a huge expense.
Exactly. So,
We looked at the Davey Street and the roof was no go zone because to have anchor points installed was 150 grand to do it. And then there's compliance issues that they've got to be checked every 12 months. And whoever's on that roof has to compliance for the height, access, working heights and all that sort of stuff. And they've got to be, you know, then you've got to have someone on site, which is probably going to be you, making sure the harnesses comply and all the gear they use comply. So just.
So the comment was about putting hot water or heat pumps or whatever on the roof and a whole bunch of compliance issues of the working at heights and anchor points and so on, and often that can be cost prohibitive for a project, and that might lead you down the path of putting something on the ground. Yep. Okie dokie. Lighting, about 10% of our energy bill now, and has anybody here done any lighting upgrades in the facilities? 1, 2, 3, change them all? It's an ongoing program, changing to LED lights around facilities. Yep. So LED lights use about 20% of the power of a halogen or an incandescent light bulb. A little bit, and maybe about 60 or 70% less than a fluorescent tube or compact fluorescent. So that's significant energy savings. They
just asking if these two guys installing and doing the stages like I am. I don't know about you guys, but I'm finding that the from last year's models, what we started 12 months ago, and we've got lights in certain hallways now. We've done 5 sections that now you can no longer buy. They're void. Yeah. So you're buying different fitting, and then all of a sudden, and I'm having a real stoush at the moment with, because of that reason. Yes, same here.
Yeah, they changed it to that.
Yeah, they dropped the wattage down.
You can vision of a brand.
ZW.
there is another brand as well when you're selling. Different brand, but it's still got the clear light. Yeah, right. Yeah, that's a smaller piece. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I put some panels up the other day.
Yep.
And they actually, and they were cool, apparently cool white, but they actually look like warm white. That's right. And I've been installing a lot of discs, the cores. I've just bought them out now for about $40. Right, they're dimmable. About 250 somewhere around about that. Cut out. And they're pretty good actually.
Weather also brings hours in car park, right?
But definitely.
One of Steve's sites that had massive amounts of mercury vapors in there, but always the air light changed to LEDs, and it was a massive save.
So LEDs are generally using a lot less energy. They can provide a really good quality of light, but it's specifying what sort of quality. So you're looking for a clear light or a warm light. It's generally, the bluer you get in your light, which is your brighter the light, is actually starts at some point it starts making people think they're in winter, and it starts affecting melatonin levels. The closer you get to sunlight, the more there's actually a healthier response from participants, from people in a building. It's actually more like the natural environment. It's also important to check what they call the CRI of an LED, of LED lights, which is the color rendering index. And that's how good a light is at illuminating something and making the colors appear. And it's from 1 to 100, and you're trying to get to a number close to 100. So the biggest number you can get on the color rendering index.
So you find out information on the boxes?
Yeah, on the boxes, or when you're asking for a quote, it's just your supplier saying, I want something with a high CRI, and get them to specify what it is. Yep. And
I spoke to a guy who's, I don't know, developing stuff in Singapore and everything, and he was saying that they were bringing out a fluorescent tube, LED fluorescent tube, that actually had emitted vitamin D.
Oh,
you know,
Have to have the right, if you're using the right medical paper, the best job of vitamin D in the body.
but anyway, that's where it is. That's what they were taking.
yeah,
I don't know whether
they've also got it so that they've got for facilities now is doing your wireless internet through your lighting system. So they actually send through micro frequencies through the lighting, which you can connect to the internet through light bulbs. There you go. Like, the world is going quite strange. With LED lights, aiming for places that use the most light. The lights are switched on the most all the time, so that might be car parks, it might be foyers, wherever you're looking for more than 8 hours a day of lighting is probably the place to start. Wherever you're using incandescent or halogen currently, changing out a fluoro to an LED doesn't quite make sense unless the whole fixture's bung and it's time to change it out. You can also improve the controls, movement sensors, daylight sensors for car parks and security lights that are not operating all through the day. So I really like, and this, yep. Indeed. You need to change the light bulbs less.
So you change the light bulbs less, and you don't have that OHS issue of getting up.
Less time up on ladders. And I really like replacement fixtures where you can use standard bayonet fixtures, because it's not a custom item. You're not having to look for, in 2 years' time, that fixture is no longer being made or supported by the manufacturer. Pretty much always going to be able to get a bayonet or an Edison screw light bulb to replace in a situation. So looking for what's a model that's consistent and long-lasting instead of a custom item. And we've got some LEDs out the back, and we've custom tracking system. A couple fail, and similarly not supported. Now it's that avoiding too much customization and making sure that it gets supported with the warranty and backup from the manufacturer. So choosing name brand and choosing suppliers who are going to stand by their product. It's really important.
The tubes, those first tubes are actually just LED direct replacements, so that it's got the driver in the tube. It overrides the starter.
That's pretty
Avoids
neat.
the cost of the contractor to replace them.
And you can also start looking at things like de-lamping as well. If you can get more light out of a fixture, out of an LED, then you might not need as many in a given space. This is pretty neat in terms of your specific, like for downlights, so replacing either halogen downlights or the cans with the compact fluorescents with the reflector behind them. Is you end up with a situation with a hole in your roof cavity, and it's actually worse than this. Insulation needs to be removed back 200 mil from the light fixtures to prevent fire. So now you can get specified abutted and covered in terms of the LED fixture, and you can put your insulation right over the top of them. And that's a brilliant solution because you're saving on lighting and you're saving on improving your heating situation as well.
That's the other thing I've found as well is that there, in some of the older LED lighting where it had the airspace around it as well, whereas now they're fixed.
Yeah.
You know, so
Fixed to the ceiling. Yeah.
So it's basically, yeah.
Yeah,
There's no airspace.
Won't be this big gap. It'll be much closer, much smaller.
Not getting any draft line down through
It's
the
actually mounted to the ceiling rather than the penetration.
Once upon a time, they used to, if that's a light, there, around the outside of it, but it could be a gimbal, where they used to tilt up and down. And so, when you go, they might blow through. And you talk about drafts.
Yeah.
You know, that's another massive core of draft coming down through the ceilings. It's through there. With the new downlights, they're a concealed unit, and it conceals and sucks up to the ceiling. It clears them.
Yep. So the comment was that you can get some excellent new fixtures which are attaching much better to the ceiling and reducing the drafts even greater than what appears in this image here. But yes, specifying for abutted, which means you can insulate over the top of them. So you're looking at payback on lighting depending on your location, maybe from 6 months to 2 years. And it really depends on the duty cycle of the lighting and how hard a changeover was it. If it's just getting a light bulb and changing it, pretty simple process. If you've got to change your whole fixtures, if you're looking at changing any wiring because of the fixtures are hardwired in, then it gets more expensive and less favourable paybacks. So look for lights which are on for a long time. Look for halogens and incandescents. Look for car parks. Anything else on lighting? There was a lot of...
Is that 6 months?
That was...
Those ones are like 50
Yeah, so replacement was on grant in the red.
And that was a payback in, that's 0.06 years, so it's about 7 months. Yeah. Yep. So that's a four grand to save you 6.5 grand a year. So that's about as good as it gets. So refrigeration came up against a bunch of commercial type cooler freezers and a heap of residential standard fridges in facilities. A lot of energy use in the commercial freezers and a lot of domestic facilities with variable star ratings, variable temperatures, variable condition. And just for things to be doing in the refrigeration sector is the pumps, a lot of cool rooms seem to be just being maintained and kept alive. And there's a lot of efficiency that can be built into variable speed drives on the compressors of refrigerators. And if you're looking at a very old, if you've got an old bit of kit over 10 years old that's still just churning away, just come and get a good refrigeration mechanic to be looking at those for installing variable speed drives. And they can have a very favourable payback. Simple thing to do, strip curtains. Just when the door's open for a couple of hours during a catering cycle, they can stop a lot of the cold air dropping out of the fridge and helping with behavioural processes in the kitchen in terms of keeping the door closed whenever possible and pre-cooling food, using the blast chillers and so on. And for the residential, there's a lot of fridges out there with half a carton of milk in them. Are they necessary wherever they are? Maybe they are. Maybe you're required to put a bar fridge in everybody's room. That situation, gradually be looking at star ratings, improving their efficiency. If it's in a staff room or a hallway where it's just not being used, take it away and someone will find somewhere else to put their half a carton of milk, because there's probably another fridge 30 metres away. So that audit of all the things that are just sitting there not doing much. In terms of the rest of the appliances, I'm not going to go into any real detail here because we ended up running into a bunch of kitchen appliances, which comes down to behaviour. So how often you cook on your gas burner. The gas burner's the gas burner's the gas burner. We can't really do much there. In terms of communal areas, it's mainly about behaviour and making sure appliances are turned off when possible. And that's staff training in order to know at a certain point of the day when to shut down equipment. And we didn't look at any medical equipment because we're not telling anybody to turn it off or put onto a power saving mode. Same with servers and those sort of rooms where you're looking at, nobody wanted us to shut down their server while we put an energy monitoring equipment on it. So we left that stuff alone. Yep. Mm-hmm.
I guess supply chain.
Indeed, you could.
It's certainly worth considering.
Mm.
And some of them are better than others. That's it.
Yep. A few occasions we saw server rooms as well. Just in their location, is they're having to run dedicated aircon in the server room to keep it cool, and just looking at some more passive cooling. A hole in the floor and a hole in the roof could cool down the thing instead of running an aircon for all the time.
Without a controlled environment, and there was better economy of scale, so it started cooling that whole environment.
Mm.
So in the end, it was a better idea to do that.
Yep.
But we hadn't considered that in the early stage.
Mm.
But it was only over time and looking at all the costs of running those air conditioning units.
So there was a location with a server room where it was much better to locate a lot of the computing off-site, where it could be more temperature controlled than located on-site. And the other comment was looking through the supply chain of where you're buying your internet services from, and there's a lot of energy consumption in the data services. I know in Europe at the moment they now have remote servers which you get paid to have in your house and as a heater in your house. So it's actually the server, they're trying to just get rid of heat, and they put it in somebody's house where they get free heat for having the server there. So there's going to be a lot more wins like that happening around the place. I think we've covered off all of these. Probably one is to do with exhaust fans, particularly in kitchens, is making sure when the kitchen's not in operation, they get turned off, because they will be sucking a heap of air out of your building into your roof cavity or externally. I'm not going to touch on pools, and it's now 12, got about 20 minutes to go. So we'll talk about some people putting on energy options on their place and how to finance them and so on. So there was how many solar power installations in the room? Yeah, there was one. There was a 50 kilowatt system in the room. I'll just go through. People feel free to chip in with their thoughts and ideas here. This is a bit of a discussion about whether it's working for your situation. So this is the anatomy of a grid-connected solar power system. The electricity network here normally is delivering electricity into your building through a meter. You put PV modules on your roof, that's DC power, gets turned into AC power through an inverter. Any electricity load inside the building at the time is delivered from the PV modules, from the solar panels get used first in your building. Any extra left over at that time gets sent back to the grid. When your PV modules are not producing electricity, then it's always drawing the power from the electricity grid. The key issue in terms of the financial viability of the situation is when you purchase the electricity from the grid, the industry average was about 17 cents per kilowatt hour. In a residential setting, it's going to be higher than that. When you export your power from your facility, it only gets paid 5.5 cents per kilowatt hour. And that 5.5 cents is roughly worked out, that's the price that the hydro gets paid to generate electricity at the moment. That's how that 5.5 cents is set. So the equation to maximise the economic benefit, to maximise the environmental benefits of solar panels is cover every square inch of your roof with solar panels. It's a great idea. To maximise your economic return from it is trying to match the size of the modules you've got on your roof to what your instantaneous demand is inside your building. So if in the middle of the day in summer, you're using 50 kilowatts throughout your facility, you want to roughly put a 50 kilowatt PV system on your roof. And that's going to be the most economically beneficial size. If you go larger than that, then you'll start having 5%, 10%, 20% exported. And that electricity that gets exported is worth a lot less than the electricity that gets used inside your building. So that 5.5 cents, that's called the feed-in tariff, which I mentioned. You've also, another variable for working out whether a system makes sense in your location is the cost of a system installation. Roughly, it's about $1.50 per watt on your roof installed nowadays. And I was doing solar back in about 2007, and it costed me $6 per watt just to buy a solar panel. Hadn't even installed it yet. And that's down to $1.50 installed now. So it's a decade massive price reduction. So it's astounded everybody in the energy sector is what's happened with solar power. You also get a rebate from the government for the installation of your PV modules, same as heat pumps and same as solar hot water systems. But this rebate is normally included in the $1.50 per watt. You don't often see that, and an installer normally takes on dealing with that part of the process. And you've got some design sizes where you've got limitations from a regulatory perspective. In order to automatically get a 5.5 cent feed-in tariff, your system's got to be underneath 30 kilowatts 3-phase or 10 kilowatts single phase. The maximum easy size to get the rebate from the small scale technology certificates is 100 kilowatts. After that, you go into a whole other regulatory framework. In between 30 and 100 kilowatts, you've got to negotiate with the Aurora and Tas networks about what your feed-in tariff is going to be. So they might pay you 5.5 cents. They might tell you to get lost. It's actually up to them to approve something. So I've only heard of people getting 5.5 cents. So I haven't heard of it being different from that.
According to the economic for the energy regulator, it is a fair and reasonable tariff. That's why they've set it at 5.5%. So I can't imagine the you know, Aurora offering you less than that. It'd be pretty rough.
And another variable which some people are interested in and will become more important as time goes on is using batteries to shift your load and working with your tariff structures. So particularly if you've got that that demand time of use tariff where you get stung with that peak usage, may well make sense. I'm just having a 10 kilowatt battery system there, which is just used to bring down the top of those spikes of usage. And that sort of control system is going to get much more prevalent in the future. Now, going to go through a few graphs, which is using those above assumptions. On the left-hand axis, we've got the cost of electricity per kilowatt hour. So we're looking at about 17 cents for the industry average here. Unfortunately, we used even numbers instead of odd numbers. Across the top is the amount of energy you're exporting into you're using on site, sorry. So here is 100% use of your PV on site and no export. And here is all of it gets exported. Simple payback period at 17 cents and 100% on site is about 6 years is the simple payback. And the more you export, the less attractive the payback period comes. So that's like 20 years here to pay it back if you're just supplying the grid with your electricity. As you, at a residential setting, you're looking down here and it's about, if you size the system's around 4.5 year payback. A more realistic level out of residential, it's probably about 40% use on site and about 60% export, which means you're at about an 8-year payback at the moment. Turns that as the rate of return on a system. So how much you're making on your money per annum over 10 years to fully pay it off. And this is doesn't include maintenance costs, doesn't include degradation of panels through time. So there's going to be, this is a pretty, and it doesn't use the time use of money. So this is probably at the favourable end.
Although it also is limited to 10 years. So
yeah. So I'll show it what it looks like over 20 years as well in a bit, which is more realistic. So 17 cents, you're looking at about 4% on the money, and then after 10 years you get X amount of free electricity probably for the next 20 years that the system's going to run for. If you look at the return over 20 years, and anything red is showing a negative, anything green is showing it's actually a positive use. At 17 cents and 100%, you're at about 9% rate of return. That's relatively, it gets more favourable the longer you look at it. Now, PV modules normally have a 20 or 25-year conditional warranty. And what they're saying is after, say, 20 years, this panel will produce 90% of the electricity that it produced in the first year. And then if it breaks, if on the 19th year, like the catch on their warranties where you think you get a 20-year warranty is, the catch is on the 19th year you find out your panel's not producing to spec, they'll pay you 1/20th of the value of the panel in the 19th year. They don't actually go, oh, here's a new panel for you. So it's a little bit, it's good, but it's not like it's a full manufacturer's warranty. There's normally a defect warranty that's more at a 2-year clause. The good news is it's solid state equipment. Good quality panels are lasting that long. I've seen a solar module that's 35 years old, still produces electricity.
The trouble is they're all made in China, right?
So
the one 35 years ago, it was probably made in Germany or something like that.
Made in Germany, and it's fully potted in epoxy. It's very, it's a bit yellow now. What you're looking for is warranty. You're looking for companies that are going to stand by their product, and you're looking to specify what they say is tier 1 equipment. So they rate equipment supplied in 3 tiers, tier 1 being the best, tier 3 being the worst. So at tier 3, I probably wouldn't trust it. Tier 2, maybe. Tier 1, yes. And there are Chinese manufacturers that are very good, and it's about having, and it's when they've got, you know, quality assurance programs, they've got international investors, and they've got actually the guts to chase up on the quality assurance. So if you're interested in going down, and this kind of is a similar concept for financing any energy efficiency upgrades. And a question for the crowd is, how do you normally fund purchases of capital? Do you loan or lease or save up the money and use your own capital? That's wonderful. So this table's got five separate options for getting the funds together for a system, and a 100 kilowatt system at $1.50 a watt's $150,000. Most facilities seem to be somewhere between 30 and 100 kilowatts is about right. So you're thinking $45,000 to $150,000 if you're going down this path. So you purchase it outright because you've saved up $100,000. Who's got $100,000 ready to spend on solar panels? Nobody. So you've got to wait. You've got to wait a long time before you buy them, and then, you know, it actually takes 6 years before you actually get a return on those because you're paying down your capital in the first period. Using business finance for loans, you're looking at maybe 5% interest, 10%, depends on, you know, your facility might never have loaned any money ever, so you're looking at a longer payback period, but you're getting financial savings from year 1, so you actually your power bill comes down. Leasing and power purchase agreements are two other quite popular approaches. A lease is you're basically paying a monthly or a yearly fee for getting the panels on your roof, and comes with a maintenance contract, and you get the benefit of reduced power bills. The power purchasing agreement, instead of renting the solar panels, you're agreeing to buy the electricity out of the solar panels. It's kind of the same thing, but some of the risks fall a little bit differently between the two approaches, but a similar sort of thing. The difference here is somebody else is taking a cut out of the savings, because there's another organisation involved who are having to fund their financing. It's great, you still don't have to pay up front, but a longer payback. A lot of the solar leasings are you lease for 10 years and then they give you the system after 10 years. That's quite a common way of it being arranged. The last one, which I love talking about, is community renewables. And there's the forum yesterday, there's a lot of interest about this. It's about you've got really strong connections in with your communities and about using them to access renewable energy. And using them to access renewable energy because people like shiny things, and solar panels seem to be the shiniest thing. If you're trying to get people to help support you buy a new heat pump hot water system, they might not go for it, but they might go for solar power for your facility. And there's two big models that are being worked, and this is interstate, this is really quite popular. A donation model, and there's a group called the People Solar, and they run a website, and you put up your facility, and then they manage a whole gift giving thing to get a PV modules on your facility. And the big picture of it is if you give them $1, if you donate $1, it'll return $3 or $4 in savings over the course of the project. So it's leveraging your money, and that can be really attractive to if you've got a really strong community. The other one is an investment model, and it's basically getting community members go in to lease you the system, and the members of the community make a small profit off the money that they've invested, and you still get cheaper power from the facility. So it's another alternative way for engaging your community. And the other thing which is probably worthwhile talking about is some facilities have got some really good opportunities which might not be related to solar power as well. So in terms of up in up in Longford, there's a wood processing facility and an abattoir nearby. They've both got really good energy resources coming out of those. So there's areas such as cogeneration, which might be using waste wood products to burn to generate heat. You can use that to heat your building. It's also generating electricity at the same time to help power your building. There's a lot of that happening in big cities like Sydney, in London, using gas they run a gas turbine to generate electricity inside the building, and then they pump the excess heat around for heating of the building. So,
another one. Somebody went over to you and the turbine on the water coming into the facility. So they were actually.
So they might be stealing money off Tas Water for that one, because they're probably pumping it at the other end of the system. So
they were sort of saving money on communications. I doing the same thing. They're buying in there, selling it out units at a year rate, so making money on that. I find communication, they did the same with that. So they were just in a different model of making money, saving money.
And there's also independent living units. Yeah.
So I think more of the point was that they were they bought in, maybe put this turbine in and collecting some power off that.
Yep.
As well as solar, so they both obviously looked at it at being a new facility as well. And sort of go, well, this is what's there, let's take advantage of it, and then payback years, will be 5 years down the track.
So there was a comment which was that a whole bunch of different options you can take in terms of sharing energy between your facilities and so on, and investing in that. And I'm going to just touch on, I really didn't paraphrase that very well, but there's regulations in terms of what you can do with energy, and you can't actually export energy to any other building except over the electricity infrastructure through the network. I can't run a power cord to the building next door here. The one area where that is not correct is in terms of trying to get the term or not, like caravan parks, and I think independent living units might fall in the same thing, where you can run your own metering through the facility. So you can start looking at putting on large solar arrays in those areas, maybe not on just every individual roof, maybe it's in a paddock, having a solar array on one of your other buildings, and then distributing the electricity through there. So it's probably something similar to that which you were discussing. Yeah, and that may well be a very favourable option in the right location. Accessing energy efficiency capital, those same parameters go there. There's leasing companies that lease a whole bunch of lighting equipment or refrigeration upgrades. Those things are possible. Same with solar panels. There's also access to financing from the Clean Energy Financing Corporation, who fund energy efficiency upgrades. But they want a lot of projects to fund. But they'll give you money quite cheaply, maybe 3.5%. But you need like a minimum of $5 million project. And okay, so it's worth a scoff. But what they have done is, for example, for the council sector, they've got an industry pool where if the councils get together and it adds up to $5 million, then it can go all go in to get access to money at that rate. And for the aged care sector, there's a lot of opportunities for that sort of things in terms of negotiating electricity tariffs. If there's 50 aged care facilities all want to say, our bill's up for grabs, let's go for it. If it's about, if there's 20 energy audits it might add up to $5 million worth of investments, and a pool could work in that sort of situation. So that industry-wide if everybody wants solar panels, you can probably get the price of an install driven right down through some coordination. There's also the National Australia Bank. They've got a pool of money from the Clean Energy Financing Corporation and will do smaller value loans down to $50,000, I think, and all at a decreased rate. And it's also people there understand energy efficiency. So instead of going and talking to them about, they're only used to buying and selling houses or whatever, they will know what an energy audit looks like and know how to assess your proposal. But in all of that, it needs a business case and it needs data to back up the investment. So things that you need and things that we can help you with, and if you're interested, we'd love to talk to you further, is energy audits like we completed with the other 9 facilities. We're also working on what we're calling a targeted audit, which is instead of building up that detailed model, it's just going to the areas that we know consistently consistently have energy savings available. I was going to the heating system, the lighting, the hot water, insulation. So go to the big ticket items and try those. Instead of going around with a clipboard counting every light bulb, we can target that down much more. It's also energy monitoring. So if you do notice a section of plant that needs detailed logging to see if it's performing well or performing badly, we've got access to detailed data logging equipment and electricians to install it. And that can include real-time off-site logging. So you can go and open up a computer console and just be seeing what any appliance is using at a particular time. So that sort of technology is available. Tariff negotiation, would be interested in being involved in that if people are going down that path. And we have also arranged PV install quote evaluation and project management if necessary. And so that's us. I would also like to thank you all for coming and guide you to www.slt.org.au/aged-care. It's also written on our capability statement there. It will have today's presentation. It has a download of the report we have there, and it's also got links to a whole bunch of other industry resources. So we've did a literature review of what's available, and there's links to toolkits, case studies, and other examples from interstate on there. And I might close down the webcast and invite the people in the room to join me for lunch. Thank you.